My grandpa always said, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And online, that's your website. And that's why London Real is currently migrating our entire web presence over to squarespace.com, an all-in-one design and build service for your website. To check them out, click on the link below, go to squarespace.com, use the code London6, you get 10% off, and make that impression. I'm gonna wrap this up unless you got any more questions.
There's one thing I quite like to ask. Obviously it's about like the scientific mindset, and how we came back from that very rigid Christian mindset where scientific thought couldn't really get a foothold in it. And I just wanted to know if you thought the pendulum had swung maybe too far in the other direction now, that maybe not like the scientific method itself, but the certain mind that the scientists come from, that it's slightly stuck in a rut and quite rigid. Because I know we had the TED Talks of Rupert Sheldrake, whose talk actually addressed that very idea, and it was sort of taken off the TED Talks.
I think it's a big issue. We see, I think, a lot of polarisation at the moment, and there is relating to Rupert Sheldrake's talk, there is a materialist scientist attitude, not just in science, but in business and in a lot of spaces. And on the other side, we have the spiritual. And, when Rupert Sheldrake was talking about morphogenic fields and his concept, which basically, I guess in that you're throwing in sixth sense and the idea that there's another dimension, I think it's absolutely valid to research that. It's as plausible as quantum mechanics, and in many ways very similar, because obviously quantum mechanics is exploring another physical dimension, but it's a dimension that's quite weird compared to that which we're familiar with. If there is a spiritual world, I think there is. I've seen a few things that I think there is no material science explanation for that event. Therefore, there's got to be something else going on here. I think it's absolutely rational to research that, and I don't think it really serves anybody to try and polarize these areas. And of course, we are one of, not the first generation, but if you go back not so long ago, several hundred years, it was absolutely normal to investigate material science and to believe in a spiritual dimension. And what's so scary about it, that's the thing. And when you see things like singularity discussed and people say, well, maybe we could be living forever. Of course, in some cultures we do already live forever. We're recycled. And in many ways that's a more romantic and poetic concept. I love the idea of being recycled and growing up somewhere else and doing something else, and then again just popping up at some other point in time. Really, really, lovely notion. It's gone too far the other way. I was personally very sad to see that TED took a couple of talks down, and I hope in not too long a period of time people realise that actually to do that, you're being a little bit like the skeptics when Charles Darwin was alive.
Or I guess quantum physics itself was a theory for so long.
But
it's a good point you raise, Alex, because I was classically trained in an engineering school, and when Rupert was sitting there talking, he starts talking about these morphic fields and the rats in Australia learning, and then the rats in England. I'm taught to think that that's bullshit. I'm taught you're taught to be physically repulsed by anyone that goes against these theories you've been taught. And as these new things come up, like you said, the singularity and all these weird ideas, I think it's very important that we try to stay open-minded. Otherwise, we're just going to be the church all over again, banning telescopes and stuff.
Yeah.
I think
so. Yeah.
But anyways, really good question. Really good answer. There you go. Melissa, thanks so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
It's always nice to have someone in here, with a breath of fresh air and someone who comes from a different place. And, I just think it's nice to have people that think about things that aren't always for profit. I think it helps to have people like that in here. So, because I think a lot of us are always like, okay, how do we make the next business, or how do we pay the bills and that? So for that, it's good.